Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're a new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, readers, and welcome to episode 28 of Fully Booked. I'm your host, Natalie, and today's episode is going to be all about my spring TBR for 2025. This is going to be my fourth seasonal TBR on the podcast, so you probably know the drill by now if you've been here a while. But before we get into the 6 books that I've picked to read, I want to talk about this season of spring when all the living things start to peak, bloom, and come out of hibernation. At least for me. Maybe spring looks a bit different for those of you living in warmer climates. And I forget if I mentioned now in my autumn TBR, but I would have to say as an adult, autumn is my first favorite, while spring is my second favorite season. And besides the fact that it starts to warm up enough that you don't need a winter jacket and boots to step outside, the main reason I like this season is actually due to allergies. Now, I've suffered my whole life from seasonal allergies, and summer seems to be the worst season for high pollen counts, or at least whatever pollens that I am allergic to. However, usually my allergies are more manageable in the transition seasons of fall and spring. And I would also add that spring feels a little more hopeful since the days also start to get longer. Not that I get capital sad, but I just feel a little less gloomy when I have more hours of the day with sunlight. But anyways, with this season of blossoming and growth upon us, I tried to pick a variety of reads to reflect some sort of change or that took place around the spring to early summer season. And so with that introduction, let's actually get into the 6 books on my spring TBR. Alright, so the first book that we have on this TBR, which probably feels the most spring-like in terms of matching the actual season, is Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Tsukigawa. I admit, this is one I had on my TBR last year and never ended up getting around to it. In fact, I have a lot of Japanese literature in general that I haven't gotten around to, and I don't know why I do not make the time in my TBR to read more Japanese literature, but I really should. And anyways, this one in particular, as I already mentioned, feels very spring-like as it's described to take place at least partly around cherry blossom season, which apparently, if you're wondering, is around May to March in Japan. But in addition, this story has a blossoming friendship between 2 characters who make dorayaki together, which is a pancake filled with sweet bean paste. Hence the title, I assume. Honestly, any story with friendship and getting to see the characters go through seasons of change feels very spring-like to me, if not in the physical, but also the mental sense. So this is one that I'm most excited to read for some, hopefully, good overall spring vibes. Alright, moving on to our second book on this list, which is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I'm gonna be honest, this one pretty much made the list because even though I'm usually pretty bad at reading new releases as soon as they come out, I have read all of Emily Henry's books probably within a month of the time that they are released, without fail. So I decided to keep the momentum going this year and put this newest release on my spring TBR to ensure I would read it before the season is over. And I'm not going to talk about this one too much since I did go over it in episode 20, where I talked about my 2025 anticipated new releases. But to give you an idea, this one is about 2 writers competing for the chance to write a famous heiress biography. And I'm curious to see how this story goes, as so far this should be her 3rd adult romance book centered around characters in the publishing industry. But she has already done kind of this similar trope where January and Gus and Beach reads were also kind of rival writers. So I'm really hoping this book ends up having its own unique premise and plotline overall. Also, this is a slightly related note that I noticed a lot of romance authors release books in the springtime around April to May, so rest assured, while this book is the only romance on my official spring TBR, I can guarantee that I will be reading other new romance releases over the next few months. Alright, the third book that we have lined up on my spring TBR is a bit of a different one, and that is First Line Wins by Ashley Elston. Now, this book definitely hits the mark on the change aspect of spring, where we have our FMC who is supposedly assuming a fake identity assigned by this elusive Mr. Smith, and honestly, we don't really know why. And that's low-key the truth, though, from reading the summary. However, it does sound like something happened in the past that is forcing her to pretend to be someone else, as well as trying to create a better future for herself, and this gets messy, especially when there is another person who joins the town she is in, assuming her actual identity. And with that summary, this one sounds mysterious yet intriguing for springtime. Plus, I've heard the audiobook is really good for this one, and I already downloaded it on Audible, so she is ready to go whenever I am ready to pick this book up. Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode. Alright, the fourth book on my spring TBR, which to me at least was one that got a lot of traction in the latter half of last year. And if you do not know which book I'm talking about, it is The Ministry of Time by Kaylee Ann Bradley. Also, sorry, I honestly just stared at her name and took a guess at how to say that, so hopefully I got somewhat close. Anyways, once again, this book isn't super spring-like in terms of the season necessarily, but we are kind of playing on the theme of change with this time travel-themed sci-fi read, which is not my normal cup of tea, but I've been wanting to pick it up for ages, especially since it won a Goodreads Choice Award last year. So in case you don't know what this is about, basically we're set in a supposedly near-future world where the government has mastered time travel, as well as being able to bring people from the past, called expats, into the present time, or what would be their future time. Excuse me. And we follow our FMC, who's tasked with integrating this Commander Gore into modern society, but inevitably starts to fall for him. But of course, since they're dealing with time travel, there are going to be some drastic consequences for each of the characters in this story. And I just have to say, this concept seems pretty unique, and I heard many raving reviews about this book last year. And not gonna lie, I was a little jealous of the person who got a copy of this book during the Blind White Elephant at my book club's holiday party at the end of last year, but I was also very excited for them to get to experience this story as well. And it's all good, as I ended up snagging a copy for myself quite recently, surprisingly at Costco, which, totally random note, do not sleep on checking out books from Costco if you have a membership, as they're starting to sell more popular books for some discounted prices, and they even sell some special editions sometimes, if you're lucky, I guess, depending on what location you shop at. Alright, the second last book that we have on my spring TBR is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Now, some of you listening might be surprised this has made it onto my TBR if you've heard this book already, as while this book won a Goodreads Choice Award last year, I didn't hear that many good reviews from the online book community, which likely only fueled my curiosity further, and I now want to find out for myself if I will actually enjoy this book. And what's also strange about it is that it's been promoted as a thriller, but apparently it's really not, and it's actually more mystery and almost litfic. I kind of forget now how it's been described to TBH. Anyways, I mainly chose this because at least part of the story takes place in spring-summer, where a teenage girl goes missing at a summer camp, and the counselor sets out to uncover the mystery. And this girl is the camp owner's daughter, plus her older brother also mysteriously disappeared 14 years earlier. So we have a bit of a decades-spanning mystery and lots of secrets going on in this story. And honestly, the only other thing I'll say is that I hope this book ends up being better than expected. And last but not least, we have a very highly anticipated book of mine, which is A Man Called Ove by Friedrich Bachmann. I'm telling you guys, I had to look up a bunch of times how to pronounce that name, and that was the supposed closest correct answer I could find. But if anyone listening is Swedish, please feel free to correct me. I've heard all kinds of variations at this point, Uwe, of, etc. Maybe that's partly why they changed the name for the movie, which, if you don't know, is called A Man Called Ove. But I also heard it takes place in Pennsylvania instead of Sweden, where I believe all or most of Friedrich Bachmann's stories do take place. Either way, this story focuses on a grumpy old man, Ove, who doesn't really like anyone and pretty much keeps to himself until one day when a young family moves in next door. And reading the rest of the summary, it sounds like this is a very heartwarming story of a man who maybe hasn't faced all of his painful past and has to undergo some character change, which again sounded good for spring reading. But honestly, besides Beartown, this is his most highly talked about book, at least from what I've heard, as well as highly rated. In fact, some people say this is better than Beartown. And since I loved Beartown so much, I'm excited to see if this book will also make it to my 5-star reads of the year list. And that wraps up my spring TBR for 2025. Hope you all enjoy listening to yet another seasonal TBR and feel inspired to pick up at least one of these books yourselves. I know I could have picked more books that actually take place in spring or early summer, but I'm still trying to diversify my reading and pick books based on a variety of factors. And don't worry, I'm sure there will be other more spring-like books that end up making it to the completed pile this season. And for those of you who haven't been around as long, I have been posting my TBR follow-up episodes on Buy Me a Coffee. So if you want to hear my reviews on each of these books, don't forget to click the link in the show notes to support/subscribe and get access to those episodes. Otherwise, I'd love to hear what you love most about spring and what book you're excited to read as the flowers and plants start to bloom. But with all that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here for episode 29. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.